Hello, both of you guys.
Hey, Bruce, thanks for including us.
Hey, Bruce,
Thanks
yes, thank you. And I think Aiden will be joining us too from Waymo.
Okay, great. Can you guys, just for those folks who don't know, in like 30 seconds, tell us what Waymo is all about and what you're doing? One of you.
Yeah, Bruce, Natasha and I are contract lobbyists for Waymo. We worked on the legislation during the session, worked closely with the representative. We're part of the self-driving coalition and have been working in conjunction with the rest of the folks and setting up the testing protocols here. Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for joining us and helping us get that legislation right. All right, well, 4 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. I saw a few more people be joining us as well, but if we'll recognize them at the end if need be. But good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Economic Development Week. That's running all week from May 9th to the 15th. And to our panel discussion titled The Gallup Mobility Hub, Next Steps. I'm Bruce Armstrong, Economic Development Manager for the Greater Gallup Economic Development Corporation, GGEDC for short. I'll be emceeing this panel. And I want to let you know that GGEDC has a mission to drive economic growth through building on local assets and strategic partnering to target attraction, retention, and expansion of industrial employers that provide economic-based jobs in the Gallup-McKinley County area. And we support and promote a business-friendly environment. Just a word on Economic Development Week. It was created by the International Economic Development Council in 2016 to increase awareness of local programs that create jobs, advance career development opportunities, and improve the quality of life in communities everywhere. This week marks the 6th annual Economic Development Week and the 6th time as well that Greater Gallup Economic Development has observed the week with local activities undertaken with various local partners throughout the week. We have daily articles running in the Gallup Independent featuring our partners, including the Northwest New Mexico Council of Governments, Gallup Business Improvement District, Gallup Arts, UNM Gallup Small Business Development Center, Gallup Main Street Arts and Cultural District, the Gallup McKinley Chamber of Commerce, and the City of Gallup Tourism and Marketing Department. So thanks to all the partners and for your contributions to this week. Yesterday, we hosted a business retention and expansion luncheon, and the keynote speaker was Alicia Keys, Cabinet Secretary for New Mexico Economic Development Department. And a few of you were there. Thank you for joining us. That was quite an event. And we are presenting 2 panel discussions, both presented as webinars, this one today and another one tomorrow at the same time, where we'll be focusing on entrepreneurship and tourism in Gallup and McKinley County. So first, let me give a special thanks to our Executive Director, Patty Lundstrom, our Deputy Director, Michael Sage, our Office Manager, Melody Natiwa, and to our Board of Directors, which consists of local business people. They all work tirelessly to bring many good things to fruition in Gallup and McKinley County. Melody, I'd like to see if you can tell people how to access the live stream of this webinar if they don't want to participate on the Zoom call.
Okay, so yes, so right now I am actually in our live, sharing the link.
Can't hear you, Melody.
Okay. Well, we can put that up in the chat box, that information when it's available. And Patty, did you want to say some words in welcoming people to this event?
Yeah, I would. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patty Lundstrom, and I serve as the Executive Director for the Greater Gallup Economic Development Corporation, and I also serve in the New Mexico Legislature. The role I have in the New Mexico legislature is I serve as the Appropriations and Finance Committee Chair for the New Mexico House. My day job, as I'd mentioned, is economic development. We're a citizen legislature, so it's not unusual for many of our members of the legislature to also have full-time jobs. Bruce mentioned this is National Economic Development Week, and to help celebrate that, we are highlighting one of our key new industry focus areas, and that's the whole mobility piece. Lots of legislative action happened during the 2020 legislative session. I thought that was a really great group effort. I want to particularly thank the New Mexico Department of Transportation and the Commission. Without their expertise and knowledge and background, I think we would have been swimming upstream. But they were a great help to us during the session. And then certainly all the partners that we have locally, from the COG to the SBDC to the BID group, the Chamber of Commerce, McKinley County, the City of Gallup, and others that are always interested in moving the needle when it comes to economic development. We are asset-based development, which means that we look at what we have and we build from what we have. And transportation, we just happen to be in one of those areas in New Mexico where transportation is a major asset, with I-40, BNSF, 491, 602, and a number of major transportation infrastructure assets has helped us in determining where we want to go and why. So I want to thank also Bob Kuipers. He's with the RPO and does all that transportation planning locally, who's on this webinar also. Again, welcome. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for tuning in. Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you, Patty. So as Patty mentioned, in this past year, Greater Gallup Economic Development Corporation has taken a very deep dive into all things mobility. We had a very impactful roundtable on the subject in February, in which all the panelists you'll see today participated. Also participating and making this a very unique event were a number of representatives from companies operating in the mobility sector, also some of whom are here today. They are already testing and developing autonomous vehicles and operating them on New Mexico highways. So moving into the panel discussion, I want to let you know that we will allow time at the end of the discussion for some Q&A. If you have questions as we go along, please do post them in the chat. You can direct them to me, and we'll try to get to them at the end. And if we don't get to them, we'll respond to you in writing later on.
Bruce, may I make one introduction, an oversight? And I do want to apologize. I need to introduce two colleagues of mine that were key on these transportation initiatives, and that is Senator Bobby Gonzalez. He's out of Taos. He carried Senate Bill, I think it was 133 for the Rural Air Bill, as well as helped us when it tremendously on the Senate side when it came to the autonomous bill, House Bill 270. And of course, the main guy on and member for House Bill 270 is Representative Harry Garcia. So I wanted the group to know that our transportation supporters are on this webinar, and I want to thank both of them for being here also. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you again. So let me introduce the panelists. Lois, if you want to say hi, everyone will be able to see you.
Hello, everybody.
Yes, Lois and Adam Wasserman are both with Global Logistics Development Partners in Phoenix, Arizona. GLD Partners is involved in supply chain analysis, logistics investment, district development, and mobility projects throughout North America, Asia, and Europe. Lois is a senior partner with that firm. She leads the firm's autonomy, competitiveness, and aviation practices. Lois was very involved in developing the New Mexico mobility strategy and has a long background in economic development and project investment management. She's now working on planning the Gallup Mobility Investment District. And Adam, if you want to say hi.
Hello, everyone. Adam Wasserman.
Thank you, Adam. Adam's the managing partner at GLD Partners. He has worked on the New Mexico mobility strategy and currently is also working with Lois on the Gallup Mobility Investment District. Well, Charles, you want to say hi?
Hi, Charles Rimke here. Happy to be here. I'm Chief of Operations for Intelligent Transportation Systems for the New Mexico Department of Transportation.
Thank you, Charles. He also chaired the Autonomous Vehicle Committee that was established by Senate Joint Memorial 3 in the 2018 legislature. And as a continuation of that responsibility, he maintains a strong channel of dialogue with various agency and industry stakeholders in the autonomous vehicle community. And Jerry Valdez, let's say hi, Jerry.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Jerry. Jerry's Executive Director with the New Mexico Department of Transportation's Office of the Secretary. He's responsible for the Data Management Bureau, Multimodal Planning and Programs Bureau, and the Research Bureau. So thank you for taking time out to join us, Jerry. I know you're very busy. He also provides strategic direction and leadership to the Office of Government Affairs, Training Bureau, Special Projects Office, and Employee Relations and Public Service. Before joining New Mexico Department of Transportation, he served as Deputy Director of New Mexico's Motor Vehicle Division and was a member of the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators. In this capacity, he began working on autonomous vehicle best practices across a wide range of motor vehicle and law enforcement agencies. So thank you all for agreeing to join us, and let's get started with the panel. I'd like to direct the first question either to Lois or Adam. Could you tell us what mobility means and if that's the same thing as autonomous vehicles?
Bruce, I'll start on that one and then I can hand it over to Adam to add his opinion. At GLDP, we define mobility as the movement of goods and people. And it is an industry that has undergone great disruption in the last 5 to 7 years. And it was undergoing this disruption before the pandemic hit, and that's only exacerbated the situation. But it's, if we think back about the auto industry or the transportation industry in general, it was something that we could always count on for years and years. If we go back to Henry Ford, we think about it was a steady, stable, sophisticated industry. It had actually one of the most sophisticated supply chains in the world. And it just, every year it had innovations and we all bought new cars. And then suddenly, because of environmental influences and other influences, their world was turned upside down and topsy-turvy. And so it was necessary for them to begin to make changes. And the legacy industries that we think about are the legacy companies like Ford and General Motors. I mean, they are scrambling now to find their role in this new world of mobility. And it's all about clean energy and technologies now. So it's not just the legacy companies that we're familiar with that are doing these things, but it's also technology companies in California, such as Robert's company that, have not normally been in the transportation business. And suddenly all these new companies are coming into it. And so as we look at the mobility world, it is changing dramatically. And it's all based on this transportation sector that we kind of took for granted for a lot of years. Adam, you want to add something?
So I would just say from our perspective as it relates to Gallup, and the focus is on the technologies, the equipment, and the business models that, number one, allow things to move around without bumping into each other. That's some autonomy. The technologies, the equipment that make that happen, the R&D that drives that, ultimately the production of the product and the supply chains that drive that. How does New Mexico play in that? Does it have opportunities it might have never had before? So autonomy, and then from our perspective, powertrain and propulsion. That's what Lois is citation around clean energy. So it's the drivers that are reshaping how people and things are moving and will move in the future. Autonomy, things that drive themselves and don't bump into each other, if you will. That applies in the air as well. There's aviation related mobility technologies that are in many ways very similar. But then the powertrains, the propulsion systems, largely in areas like hydrogen and electric, that will alternatively propel our vehicles in the future. And it's not far off. The technologies are relatively there, developing, refining, and we're working with many companies that are sort of ready to launch, or certainly over the next 3 to 5 years. So how does New Mexico play in that, support the product development, the research, the testing, and ultimately more?
I'd like to ask each of the panelists how you got involved in mobility and how your involvement may be changing going forward with the enabling legislation that recently passed the legislature. I'd like to start with Charles.
Thank you, Bruce. I was originally, as you mentioned, involved with Senate Joint Memorial 3 on the chair, and that is specific to autonomy with mobility. And there's a contrast between the two. And intrinsic to mobility is not just transportation of movement of goods and materials, but it's the quality associated with that transportation. And quality in a lot of circles, as it relates to mobility, is tied back to time, affordability, and safety. And specific to mobility is access. And autonomy provides really, it's not a contrast to, but it's more a subset of mobility, and how does it improve access to those three elements of quality transportation, namely time, affordability, and safety. Safety, the benefits are really inherent. 94% of the crashes are human caused. Those can be eliminated to a large degree. Affordability on a much larger scale can be tied back with immediate results to the cost associated with fatalities and the cost associated with crashes. You know, we have close to about 42,000 deaths in 2020 last year, and each one of those fatalities is tied back to about $1.8 million worth of cost. If you do the math associated with that, autonomy will have a very dramatic effect on the affordability associated with economic returns, or more importantly, the diminishment of economic costs. And as it relates to time, autonomy can greatly improve the congestion mitigation associated with allowing for either less headways, but also managing to reduce the number of incidents or the non-recurring congestion associated with crashes and things of that nature. The amount of time that will be saved by your motorist just tied back in traffic on the infrastructure, we see autonomy as being greatly improved to the aspect of mobility. Jerry, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, and if you don't mind, Bruce, let me just talk a little bit about my background as it relates to mobility. You know, I began my state career with the Motor Vehicle Division in 2010. In that capacity, we were responsible for not only everything related to mobility as it relates to traffic safety, but the licensure and the permitting of vehicles and helping in commerce from a commercial perspective. As the deputy director, we're also overseeing traffic safety education as it relates to, you know, your traditional licensure. And so in that capacity, I was allowed the opportunity to be part of Senate Joint Memorial 3. I partnered with other state agencies. Charles provided the leadership necessary to really formalize going on already nationally from the perspective of autonomous vehicles. And so since joining the NMDOT team, I've continued that passion around promoting these types of technologies and really trying to evaluate how they fit in to the overall economic health of the state, and not only from the perspective of licensing roads, but how it fits in overall. So happy to be part of the discussion today as well.
Let's go to Adam. Adam, how did you get involved in mobility, and how has the legislation changed what you're doing in New Mexico?
Well, Bruce, we've been involved with the automotive industry for a long time, working with the industry on strategy, supply chain issues, and facilities. And one thing has led to another. We've been involved with a series of mobility projects, R&D projects. In fact, project that is now Waymo's a main facility in Waymo's R&D testing in California. We helped stand that up and worked with Waymo and a number of other companies on similar projects in that area. We had the opportunity to be involved in the New Mexico mobility strategy. The state legislature, state administration asked us to sort of put some ideas forward, and frankly, it was pretty easy in a way because we picked up on what Charles and Jerry had already started, and it was very thoughtfully developed. And then what we did is we built a structure around that, which said, what is the state in the southwest of the U.S. that really hasn't really put forward much in the way of formal strategy, doesn't have much auto industry, if you will. Is there a role for it in the future? And so we can talk about that later and be happy to chat offline. But we believe that the Western states, including New Mexico, have an opportunity for a whole host of reasons to develop a niche in the wide, newly developing sector. Partly it's geography, partly it's technology, partly it's the will, and part of that will, legislative will and leadership that Patty, Representative Lundstrom, talked about earlier, is critical to welcome and accommodate the industry and make it easy. Say we want you, and say here's what we're going to do to help you. So it's a little bit from us. Lois?
Well, I would just add that obviously everything that Adam was doing too, that was part of our practice at that point in time. But one thing that Adam didn't mention was that when we were working in California and had the experience of working with Waymo at their proprietary testing center, we also were involved with DMV in California as they promulgated rules and regulations for the industry. So we watched them go through their ups and downs of doing that. And it was really very helpful to us in learning about, how these things should roll out across the country. So it really gave us a great background to work from.
Thank you, Lois. I'd like to ask Charles what kinds of things New Mexico Department of Transportation will need to consider in preparing for rolling out autonomous vehicles.
The autonomous community has always basically asked what will benefit a normal driver will benefit us. So in a lot of ways, from just an infrastructure management standpoint, it's ensuring that the roadways that we have, we continue on to that path. It might require going in and doing a survey or evaluation with various levels of automated systems to make sure that our signage has good conspicuity, as well as the pavement markings are easily detected. But on a larger scale, the DOT recognize the value associated with what autonomous vehicles bring, and that the improved safety and the improved infrastructure operations are what's called TSMO within the transportation vernacular, transportation systems management and operations. We're in step and align with the goals and objectives associated with what the autonomous community will be able to bring. So more than anything, just from a philosophical standard, we want to stand shoulder to shoulder with them and work collectively to ensure that they will be able to feel comfortable coming to the state and identifying any specific needs associated with their continued testing. And if it's maintenance related, if it's infrastructure construction related, we want to be there with them.
Perfect. Let me ask Jerry. Patty mentioned the legislation that passed, and we've got some of the legislators on this call. But I'd just like to ask Jerry to give us in a nutshell, what does this legislation that passed do? And then if you could just elaborate some of the kinds of rules and policies that will need to be put in place.
No, thank you for that, Bruce, and thank you for the tremendous support that was provided by Representative Lundstrom, Representative Harry Garcia, and others, Senator Padilla as well. It was a team effort to get House Bill 270 passed. And what 270 does is it codifies the rules governing automated vehicle testing in New Mexico. But more importantly, it builds on an already strong relationship with industry to promote the autonomous vehicle testing system in New Mexico and signals to industry that New Mexico is open for business when it comes to promoting automated technologies. House Bill 270 also allows platooning of vehicles that are part of a driver-assisted platooning system, and it exempts platooning vehicles from the 300-foot following too close requirement under Section 66.731A. So what that does is it really opens up New Mexico as a partner to industry to say, we're setting ourselves apart from other states. Somebody earlier talked about California, and New Mexico wants to be leading these initiatives when it comes to opening our state for industry. And so what House Bill 270 does is allows industry to know that we are partnering, we want to be with them, and we want to work with them in this ever-changing technology that is emerging. You asked about what the rulemaking process looks like. Well, some of the things that we're going to consider, of course, is the credentials of the AV testers. We already have a strong working relationship with these manufacturers who are in our state right now. But what we don't want is this to open up the door for John Q. Public, who are developing autonomous aftermarket parts, to be on our roads. So there's going to be a validation of who's testing.
Jerry, I lost you there. Let's see.
Bruce, I'll just add to that since we kind of lost Jerry and connectivity. All the major developers, the National Autonomous Program goes through a self-certification process, and they're quite vigorous on themselves. And one of the things that they are looking at through the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration, as part of this self-certification, is that every vehicle that will be autonomous in nature still has an incumbent responsibility to live up to the federal motor vehicle safety standards, regardless of whether it's being driven by an automated driving system or if it's a system that can move in and out of autonomy. So, the one thing that we do want to be able to make sure, and that's we have a responsibility for operating a safe infrastructure, is that we have credible developers here that have a long-standing pursuit of the industry, and that is, autonomy will add a lot of value to people's lives.
So the legislation gives the New Mexico Department of Transportation authority to create and I guess enforce those rules. Is that correct?
What I would like to say that it gives us the responsibility of due diligence and working with the community, because believe me, this community wants to see success And anytime that there is anything that happens within the autonomous community, it's a black eye on them as well. So they're looking out for their own interests by ensuring that the infrastructure is safe. So I look at this as a joint effort of, if you want to call it authority, yeah, we're authorized by the law to establish the rulemaking process. But the rulemaking, I think, will be a collaborative effort that will take in the concerns of the public as well as the needs of the stakeholders.
Very good. Well, that Lois and Adam both touched on the New Mexico mobility strategy. And Lois, if I could just ask you, very briefly to encapsulate what the New Mexico strategy is for mobility.
Love to. And first of all, I have to acknowledge Senator Gonzalez, who's with us today, and also Senator Padilla, who are the real reason that we have this New Mexico mobility strategy. It was through them and their interest in seeing how New Mexico could be more competitive that this study even came about. They put together the funding for it, and the study is a result of their commitment to this. So thank you very much, Senator Gonzalez. It was great. We worked on this project about 9 months, and the senator was good enough to meet with us about once a month and to give us his ideas and his opinions as we went through the strategy. So it was a great experience for us. The senators had learned that New Mexico was one of about 8 states that had no published regulation or opinion or a briefing about autonomous vehicles. And so that was the first thing that concerned them. And then they were interested in finding out whether there are any economic development opportunities that could be attached to the autonomous vehicle industry. So what we did in the study was we reviewed the entire, all 48 states, and looked at everything that was going on. We looked at the legislation that they were putting into place. There were some states that had actually gone through legislation. There were some states, such as Arizona, that just did an executive order from the governor and didn't even really have in place any rules or regulations. Then we also did what we called a comparison or a competitive analysis between the states that we felt like were the most aggressive in autonomy. And that would have been, we looked at Detroit, Michigan, we looked at Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, because Uber was headquartered in Pittsburgh. Carnegie Mellon University was a major force behind this in the beginning. We looked at Florida. Florida is one of the first states that enacted any legislation on the autonomous industry. And we looked at Silicon Valley for all the obvious reasons. And we looked at their educational endeavors. We looked at every facet of what we thought made had an important role in the autonomous vehicle industry. And so we did that competitiveness assessment. And quite honestly, New Mexico actually showed very well, considering that it had no legacy auto industry. But interestingly enough, if you take a look at those federal labs that you have sitting around Los Alamos and Albuquerque, a lot of foundational work of technologies that are going into this industry are coming out of those federal labs. So the labs, in their cooperation and collaboration with the universities, it's been able to give New Mexico a real good foundation. So at that point, we decided that we had to create a value proposition. What would the value proposition be specifically for New Mexico? And I'm going to turn over to Adam now. Adam came up with this great name for our value proposition, and I want him to share that with you.
Well, some of these issues are fairly sexy. There's a lot of folks that are interested in the technologies that drive autonomy and propulsion. Speaking about mobility, we're not simply speaking about autonomy. And so there's a lot of companies involved. There are many more companies involved than there were when we started this. There are a lot of cities and states that have put their oar in the water. And there are very few, maybe none, no state has really thought about this from a statewide perspective and from an economic development perspective at the same time. There are pockets, clearly, where folks have gotten quite aggressive. But we said by geography, by the highway system, the adjoining states, by the weather, by that New Mexico owns 2 transcontinental interstate corridors that run through it, et cetera, et cetera. We thought, well, what if we think of the state as a laboratory? We worked on a lot of projects with industry and companies in some cities and some states. We haven't worked on anything that really is thoughtful from a much larger perspective. The entire state, with the state government behind it, as a place to test and develop and hopefully create these products. At least the niche that New Mexico could provide unique and specific value for. So we built some strategy around that and some specific propositions and project, and said, let's use the interstate highway system as the spider that connects 3 hubs, a hub in Albuquerque, a hub in Gallup, and a hub in southern New Mexico around Las Cruces. So it gets us the 2 interstate corridors, gets us access to multi-state testing and the workforce potential in Arizona and in Texas. Accesses Albuquerque as the hub, as the large urban hub, but with interstates colliding from different directions in Albuquerque, but then connecting up with these unique hubs in southern New Mexico and northwestern New Mexico, with a focus on various fairly specific sorts of testing and development that each area could specialize in. And that, combined with a state intention and focus and regulatory system support and incentives, could be sort of made to be quite unique nationally. And out of that comes the Gallup proposition, which is really the launch of the New Mexico mobility strategy. Credit to everyone in Gallup for making that happen.
Adam, if I could follow up on that, more precisely, how does Gallup fit into the state strategy? And what kind of opportunities do you see the Gallup Mobility Hub will create for Gallup?
Well, Gallup sits near the Arizona border, a couple of hours west of Albuquerque, and straddles one of the most important interstate highway corridors in the country. It's got rail. It's a mobility. It's a logistics hub anyway. And we thought, how do we take advantage of New Mexico's corridor testing potential, some of which is happening today? How can we encourage more of that, and then monetize that for even more value for the region and the state later? So New Mexico's role is in some part going to be on trucks, in some part going to be on passenger vehicles. And we think that the truck element is a potentially powerful proposition for New Mexico and for Gallup. Taking advantage of I-40, testing in between Albuquerque and Gallup, and then on to other locations. Being able to access into Arizona very quickly, so 2-state testing. And then start to take advantage of some of the opportunity and potential around, for example, as we think about the technologies and the products, then we start thinking about the service. So, there are companies, and one of them's on the call today, that is thinking technology but providing service, and that exists in cargo transportation, passenger transportation as well. So, as we think about partnering and working with companies that are transporting cargo from, let's say, California, or let's say the ports in Southern California, where does Gallup sit as it relates to that, as a spot on the map as trucks hop across the country? So I think we'd like to position this small, powerful region as strategically located, with the right infrastructure, with the right state proposition and support above it, with utilizing the road system in the state from urban area to urban area, let's say Gallup to Albuquerque and beyond that, but then specialized facilities in Gallup to support testing in a way that perhaps isn't quite offered in other places.
And if we could stick on the topic with Gallup, the preliminary conversation envisions this hub as a location and situated in the Gallup Municipal Airport. And I just wondered if you could speak to what makes the airport advantageous to be a mobility hub.
You want me to do that, or who do you want to do?
You can do it.
You can keep on.
I'll start it and Lois will dutifully finish it. Well, the airport is, airports are interesting for a variety of reasons for projects and initiatives like this. One is people have to get in and out. And so if we could help support airport operations and the fact that there is an airport and you can fly in and out of it, we've worked on projects where we're sitting there working with let's say a European company, and they say, if it's at an airport, we can actually fly our team in from someplace else. So airport makes it easy to get to, and realizing that most of the industry is not in New Mexico and not in Gallup, the issue of connectivity to places like Silicon Valley or Los Angeles or Detroit or many other places in the end is uniquely critical. If we're hard to get to, it's going to be hard to attract the industry to do business there. The other thing is airports are long and linear, and some of the infrastructure we're working on, we're going to pursue, needs long and linear sort of perspective. So as we work on some testing infrastructure for let's say cars and trucks, they want different sorts of infrastructure to test and develop their product on. Some of that infrastructure is long, where they could do some high-speed testing. High-speed testing needs a mile, 2 miles, maybe even 3 miles of length. And there's not a whole lot of property opportunity access, without an airport. Airports have that. The other thing is the airport is owned by the city. And if the city is interested in participating in this and supporting that growth, then it makes it a proposition that the city can be directly involved in.
So that part of the value proposition is we hope to bring air passenger service back to Gallup. And we also are looking at the possibility to develop the airport as a research industrial facility where these companies can come and test their vehicles. So Lois, can you speak to what kinds of facilities would be in the airport under the picture that we're putting forward?
Well, I think it's important for everybody to understand that at an airport, there are aeronautical and non-aeronautical lands. And so we have to be sure that anything that we would do there would not intrude on any kind of aeronautical activity, so that it wouldn't impede any passenger service or anything else. But one of the things that we think could be very, very successful would be sort of an off-road test center, where understanding that before, as a company begins to test their technologies, they don't want to be on the highway until they're sure it's safe. So they have to have off-road places to go. And I know if you drive through the Silicon Valley in California, you'll see testing going on in parking lots, kind of weird places, because they're looking for places to test anywhere that they can. So if we can put an off-road test facility running near the airport on airport land, we think this would be a great place for companies to begin to initially test their technology in a very safe, secluded area.
Lois, Bruce, may I add to that? Because Lois's point, in our work with industry, the main issue that comes up over and over again, and industry means a lot of things, is testing. We need support, help, and infrastructure to support the development of our products. And it just doesn't exist in most settings. And a lot of companies just make do. So we hear this over and over and over again. When we first started really in the space, we were a little naive and we said, okay, that's interesting, but that's just the next handful of years, right? And the industry, to a person almost, sort of suggested to us that this isn't going to go away. I mean, eventually maybe it does, but this is not a testing for a couple of years and we get it right, stick it on the road and it's done. This is going to be an iterative process, and the technology is going to incrementally change and grow. We are working with some, let's say, Asian manufacturers that are heavily involved in autonomy and propulsion system development. And they're not selling any products in the North America today, but several of them have significant R&D laboratory in the United States. And we know that they do plan to manufacture product in the US, or sell product in the US first, manufacture it perhaps a little bit later. And these companies are going to probably invest where they're testing and developing. They're going to invest where they know. And we'll hope that's a Gallup and a New Mexico. But unless Gallup and New Mexico put its foot forward, it really doesn't have that opportunity in the way we're talking about.
So speaking to the technology, we're talking high tech, both in the vehicles, the technology that steers and guides them, that they communicate, how the vehicles communicate with each other, as well as the propulsion that you mentioned. We're talking, the vision is primarily hydrogen for large vehicles and electric for cars. So this technology is still coming into being as we speak, and it's moving very quickly. But I'd like to, as we try to get in front of this curve, I know that one of the questions is how do we bring the workforce? And you mentioned the participating with the state labs, but if I could get either you or Lois to speak to how do we prepare our workforce specifically for these jobs that are coming? What kind of jobs are we looking at?
I'd be glad to answer that, Bruce. But first of all, I'd like to talk about what we see as the economic development opportunity, and then we can sort of roll into what the jobs would be. But Adam and I believe so strongly that this is a generational economic development opportunity. It's very rare to see these things roll out. And we have an opportunity to make a difference and to make a mark in this right now. So that is what really drives us every day, because we know there's so much potential here. And we believe so strongly that communities that understand and embrace these technologies that we're talking about have an opportunity to be ahead of the curve and to get these new industries to come and locate in their vicinity, and then also to create new jobs for their economy. So we see new tech clusters being formed, and we think that these tech sectors will going to be around for decades. I mean, when we think about the electronics industry and how that began, and then I'll talk about in just a few seconds about one of the companies that's sitting in Albuquerque that I think has an unbelievable opportunity right now, which will reflect on you as time goes on. But the point I guess I'm trying to make is there is a whole brand new ecosystem being created around this mobility world right now. And it's changing every single day. Robert Brown's company, a couple of years ago wasn't even in existence. You had Waymo, that was sort of the grandfather of all of this. And every day, new companies are being created, new technologies. They're being bought up and acquired by the legacy companies. So the landscape is changing literally every week as we move forward in this. And the supply chains have not been formed around this new industry yet. So we have an opportunity to get our foot in the door and to see if we can't make a difference for New Mexico with this strategy. But let's look at the ecosystem a little bit. One of the first things that you look at is obviously you have the OEMs like Ford and GM. And then the next tier down, you have what they call the tier 1 suppliers, which would be, you've heard of Continental and Bosch and Magna International. These are the companies that are providing, putting together the software and the hardware for the OEMs. And then you have the component manufacturers of those bits of electronics that are going into the larger systems. Then you have telecommunications companies that are going to be, during your roundtable, it was so apparent how important telecommunications is to moving this data around. And then you have data aggregators that are really actually moving that data from one telecommunications company to another. And so you have different tiers of this ecosystem. And I think every one of those tiers is an economic development target. And that's what makes this so exciting. So as we look at what goes into this, we see batteries. We hear about batteries every single day. We have electric motors. And one of the things that you see in the headlines every day is semiconductors. You have a company sitting in Albuquerque called Intel, which Intel's 11th fab in the history of their company was put in Rio Rancho, but Intel has not invested in that fab in all these years. That was in the late 80s. In fact, the most recent fabs announced were like 47 and 48. So that's how far the technology has advanced since 1988, 1989. But Intel just made an announcement. They are going to retrofit the Rio Rancho facility, put new equipment in, and start making semiconductors there again, because Intel is one of the only companies left in the United States that still makes their own semiconductors. They obviously get some from outside the country, but the country is in such dire need of semiconductors. And Intel actually, I think, kind of lost their way over the years, and they're going back to their roots. They just got a new CEO, they're going back to their roots. And as we talk about a cluster of industries that can give you economic growth and vitality for decades, Intel is going to be one of them. They've been there since 1988. Now they're recommitting to that facility. And that's semiconductors are the foundation of all these vehicles that we're talking about. So I just think, I'm being a little dramatic here, but I just think it's such a wonderful opportunity. And it's just great that New Mexico has the vision to take a look at this right now. Adam, did you?
I was just actually going to jump in and kind of, even though it's not my swim lane, I was just on a call and learned about my friends in the semiconductor world that, and to what Lois talked about, an average internal combustion new vehicle today requires 800 semiconductors. An electric vehicle will require 3,000 to 4,000 semiconductors. So it shows you just, in everything that we use today is required, and it's just going to be growing exponentially. So it is an amazing growth opportunity. We're all feeling the crunch right now in the industry getting them, but the long-term viability of that is truly incredible.
Specifically for Bruce, for Gallup, what's the opportunity and the workforce related issues and everything that Lois just described? Yeah, you can pick up. This is the importance of a statewide initiative, because Gallup is of a certain size and can have a certain profile, and the idea is to grow that, to attract the skills that Gallup can sustain today, partner with the educational institutions, and we've been party to that firsthand in regions where they had modest levels of skills, some, but the industry came and tested and developed and started to kind of work with local educators in providing the tools to support the industry on site. But Gallup's probably not going to host a 5,000 person assembly plant, right? Albuquerque might not, New Mexico might not, but it can support segments of that are quite deep and very rich. And with a statewide strategy, other elements potentially could be provided somewhere else. We had the opportunity to be involved in a testing and development complex in Europe, and it was an EU-wide project for the auto industry, and it grew into some of the specific mobility applications. But we watched every automaker that sold vehicles in Europe populate R&D complex around that testing complex, because they did their R&D and they went out into the field and tested, and they brought it back, and it was constant movement, frenetic movement back and forth. So we'd like to see some engineering, small engineering shops set up in New Mexico and in Gallup. We'd like to see more of that and elsewhere in the state leading up to production. I think what Daimler has established already on I-40 in Albuquerque doing testing is an example of that. On the public road, we provide off-road testing infrastructure. We will see more interest and more need to be closer to home.
Very good. Lois, can I just follow up, and if you can touch on some of the specific areas that will need to be addressed in the colleges and high schools?
Sure. One thing that I did want to bring up is that in this conversation of autonomous vehicles, there's been a lot of concern about truck drivers losing their jobs over time. And the one thing that I would like to point out is that this is not happening overnight. This industry is not taking over overnight. It will be years and years before it becomes mainstream. So there's an opportunity for the workforce development community, for the universities, for the community colleges to learn what these new positions are going to be and to train people. But even in terms of the truck drivers, the truck drivers' jobs are not going to go away. Some of them may go away, but they're going to change. Those jobs are going to change. And Robert, I don't know whether y'all have been talking about remote drivers or not, but I know that some of the companies that we've been speaking to have talked about remote drivers, and there might not be a driver in the truck, but then there'll be a remote driver, sort of like these F-18s that are flying around, have all the little drones around them, and somebody's sitting back in a little back room, guiding the drones around. And that, in case of emergency or in case of difficult situations, the remote drivers can help the autonomous truck get through situations. Have you all considered that?
Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about. Too simple. We don't have what we call remote drivers, but definitely remote monitors. And you are 100% correct. What Too Simple is doing, what Waymo is doing. I saw Aiden join the call, so feel free to jump in as well. It is not going to surprise anyone. It's going to be very incremental. It'll be route specific. It's not going to be snap your fingers and all of a sudden robot trucks are everywhere. And like you said, a young person that's a driver today will retire a driver if he or she chooses, and hopefully their job will be better, higher pay, better benefits. Because
right.
Well, the technology can drive itself in a certain segment, but you need drivers on both ends. You need drivers to launch, to land, to maintain these vehicles. I mean, the automation will augment the driver. There'll be segments where there'll be driverless, but when we use the term driverless, it scares people. It's like thinking, massive job loss, but no, it's going to be,
right.
Job gain. And we work with, and same as Waymo works with partners like UPS, who's the largest Teamster employer in the country, and the companies that are looking to leverage this technology are the companies that, need their drivers today and will always need their drivers. So again, want to communicate that, and ourselves and Waymo and others, we are working hand in glove with our community colleges where we are today, where we're going next. Again, retraining that future workforce for our segment, which is automated trucks.
Right. I'm glad you were able to add that, because I think it's important that people not overreact at this point in time, that this is going to work its way out. And then you have bus drivers and you have shuttle drivers, and those positions will change too. I'll give you an example of a company that was doing testing of a shuttle on educational campuses. They had an accident, somebody fell down and hurt themselves, and they had to stop their testing. And I think that sort of goes to the thought that maybe there will be they might call them concierges or an attendant on these vehicles. They will not be, totally without people. And so these jobs will change, but they were always, they're not going to go away. They're just going to be a change of jobs, and new jobs are going to be created. And in about 2017, Michigan started taking a look at workforce development and how it might change, because they had no idea what new jobs were being created. So they actually got some money from the feds, and they did a study, and there weren't as many online job opportunity, companies like Indeed then, but they did some research, and they looked at all the jobs that were being listed for what they perceived to be working in the autonomous vehicle industry. And that was back in 2017, and they just redid that study, and they took a look at it now. And what they've done is they've taken those jobs and actually did desk audits in these companies. And they found out that in some cases, some of these jobs were being advertised for just college graduates. And after doing a desk audit, they realized that some of these jobs don't require a college graduate, but a community college education, some certification, a trade school, or a technical school background, and then training that would go on within the company. And they have been able to now sort of begin to define what they call middle level jobs that would not be, there are always going to be demand for an electrical engineer, a software engineer, really highly educated people, but more and more opportunities are being developed for those people that have the opportunity to go to a community college or get a certificate, get within the workforce system of these companies, and then work their way up. So the one thing that I would say to educational providers at the university level in New Mexico, as I mentioned before, I think you're pretty lucky. I think you've got some really good technical schools, New Mexico Tech, New Mexico State University, University of New Mexico. You've got people coming out of the laboratories, still working in the laboratories, working with these universities. Lots of opportunity for well-educated people coming out of the University of New Mexico. And I think that the area that we need to look at is the community college level and the trade school or the technical school level. And the one thing that I would say is that any one of these companies that you're going to talk to, these people that you bring in have to have critical thinking skills, just the soft skills that we always talk about. And even if you think about STEM background, you still have to have critical thinking skills to be successful in these jobs. And so we don't want to diminish any of those things that we've been talking about for years. We just want to add to it. But as we do more and more work in this workforce development side, we're able to define positions that we think will be effective in this industry. And in Michigan right now, they have designed a position called a mobility technician. And it's based on a technician that would be in the electronics industry, or that would be, in any of the aerospace industry. And then that's a starting position. And so the community colleges can put together some courses that would deal with that, but it's based on things that they're already doing. So as this industry becomes more refined and defined, it will be much easier to be able to, define specific positions. But right now we can't tell you enough that, just keep producing kids that are good critical thinkers and can read and write well and can work well in teams and work in the marketplace.
This is
Great.
Aiden from Waymo, and just
Go
very
ahead.
briefly, I can jump in, echoing what's been said here. I think it's important, as Robert mentioned, and as others have said, that really the idea should be reframed around the opportunity for new jobs and basically the transfer of jobs versus the elimination of jobs. And again, echoing what Robert said, I think what's exciting for us is that there's significant opportunity for a variety of jobs within the autonomous space, and all of them, a lot of them don't actually need to have a four-year degree or even a degree in any type of a highly technical field. There's a lot of on-the-job training. There's a lot of roles that can be taken on with just a high school degree, and so it's not something that you need to have a computer science degree to be operating within the autonomous space. I think it's important to really recognize that and look at what opportunities this will create versus the segment of jobs that will slowly be eliminated. And the last thing I'll say too is, again, fully echoing what Robert said, this is not an overnight thing. We're not going to have thousands of trucks on the road 2 years from now. It's going to be a very slow and incremental process. And so it shouldn't be something that folks see as, coming in as a scary thing to take over an existing industry. It's going to be something that's slowly integrated into the existing trucking industry and help support what's already in place.
Follow on that, if I can go to Jerry or Charles, I just want to know what if NMDOT is thinking about what kinds of jobs you're going to have to train for within DOT related to autonomy, and what the thinking is there.
And I want to just start off, and Charles, you could end it. But we concur with Lois and Adam. People don't normally think about DOT as the largest engineering organization in New Mexico, but we are. And so when we're going into these universities and these high schools, we want to really make sure the engineers who are coming into the DOT understand that they're going to be coming into an environment where they're designing roads for the future. Think about that. But the future is now. And so as we're trying to develop a strategy around getting young engineers to start thinking about DOT as a potential career opportunity, this is exactly the type of thing that we can sell, that we can market, and really tap into their entrepreneurial spirit to come and work for the state of New Mexico. So not only as engineers, but as public servants to drive the state of New Mexico forward. As well, when you start thinking about autonomous vehicles, they're computers on wheels, if you really think about it. And so we want to make sure that we're attracting individuals who really have an understanding about cybersecurity. not only cybersecurity from the perspective of the vehicle, but, and Charles, I'm sure can speak about it, as we're building the roads of the future, we're connected in more ways than we ever were in relation to infrastructure out there. So we're absolutely looking at the skill sets at DOT, seeing what we need to really market ourselves for, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the citizens of New Mexico. Charles, if you have anything else.
Yeah, working within the intelligent transportation systems, that's been kind of a dilemma for us as to what does the new workforce look like. It does require a level of technical acumen, along with your standard transportation related understandings and appreciation. One of the things, when we look at autonomous vehicles, in a lot of ways, the highly autonomous vehicles are going to have a level of connectivity with them as well, and that connectivity can, a lot of ways, be traced back to infrastructure that we have out on the roadway. There's been this debate between 5G or DSRC, which DSRC is a radio type of communication, but the 5G is going to be the ubiquitous level of kind of a cloak or web fabric that will allow for the transfer of information that we as an agency can share that will add real value to these to all these things or needs. For example, whenever we first know that that the roadways are going to be wet or slippery at a particular location, not only can we use that from a maintenance perspective, but we can share that with all the drivers out there. And being able to ensure that our systems are communicating well will require a slight transition to basically, like I said, a communications network understanding to one, identify where we have potential risks and try to mitigate those risks before they come into play.
Thank you, Charles. So you touched a little bit on the safety aspect earlier, both you and Adam, and obviously that's in the foremost part of a lot of people's thinking when they first hear about autonomous vehicles. They might be reading about an accident somewhere, and we sense there's a fair amount of fear, and we need to overcome that as we move this industry forward, and especially here in Gallup, I think. So if you could speak to, let me just stick with you, Charles, as we think about autonomous vehicles and this new technology that's coming out, what steps do we need to take to assure that pedestrians and vehicles with actual human drivers and human passengers will be safe amongst the autonomous vehicles in Gallup and throughout the state?
Yeah, and I'd like to put a little bit of a weighted perspective to that, and that is, regardless of whether, when you're in a driving environment, you're inherently vulnerable to the elements around you. And those elements would require either a response from a driver to avoid something that might be happening around them, or a response from an initiator. That said, in order to respond, there has to be a level of awareness that's what's going on. So, and in fact, within the autonomous community, we call that object event detection and response, but it's really no different than a regular driver, right? So if you start looking at, first of all, you have to be aware of a risk. And from a perspective as to, is this risk being imposed upon me by an autonomous vehicle, or is this risk being registered that it might exist out there by the autonomous vehicle? You have to have, like I said, this level of awareness. A human driver or pedestrian is really only getting their information in by their cone of vision or by the sounds that they have. It's basically a stimulus based. Now, when you start looking at the technologies associated with information access on an autonomous system, they're using a variety of different elements. It can be radar, it can be LiDAR, it can be just camera systems. It can be camera systems that are wide angle in nature, camera systems that are infrared in nature. And there can be multiple placements to eliminate occlusion, as well as being able to get the most complete level of understanding as to taking in this information and identifying conflicts. So all of a sudden, the awareness aspect of things are greatly enhanced within an autonomous environment. Then the reaction, being able to determine what to do. Autonomous vehicles on average takes about 0.5 seconds in order to provide a proper response of all the different elements, whether that's braking, steering, evasion, even in a sense, possibly rear collision, someone coming up, lane shift, things like that. So the autonomous vehicle not only has an enhanced level of awareness, but they have a very heightened response time. In contrast to a person can take anywhere from 1 to 3 seconds. And that's 1 to 3 seconds to register and then go on to the next step. And that 1 to 3 seconds registering could be, okay, do I put my brake on here? Do I do an evasion? So will crashes occur? Undoubtedly. Will they incur in a higher frequency? I don't think so. I mean, I feel confident not, because of just the statistics alone, 95% of crashes are caused by humans. If we can greatly reduce that by having the automated systems eliminating those human caused crashes, that will go a very, very long way. But will they occur? Yes, they will. And the problem is, in my opinion, is it's not so much of the media and publicity that we get about one crash that occurs, but just how immune we've got to the 42,000 deaths from crashes that occur that are caused by humans.
Thank you very much, Charles. And I want to ask each of you to just name one critical step that you see. What's the most important next step? And let's try to focus on Gallup as we roll out the Gallup Mobility Hub. And let me start with Lois. What would you say is the most critical step?
Well, I think you've instituted this this study as that we're going to, or this plan that we're a part of right now, and I think that's the next most important step. You got to find out if you can do it and how you do it, and that's what we're setting about to do right now.
Hey, Jerry.
Thank you, Bruce. And piggybacking off of what Charles mentioned, I think the next step is really the education of the public to make sure that we're eliminating the fear and the anxiety that comes with misinformation. You know, at the turn of the century, when we went from horse and carriage to motor vehicles, there were no street signs, there were no stripes, there were nothing. And when those loud, obnoxious cars came down the road, horses jumped and, you know, it was a big deal. Now we're coming into the new century and people are afraid again. And so I think education and involving the public to eliminate that fear and anxiety is going to be critical to the success of this type of program.
Thank you, Jerry. Adam.
I don't have a lot to offer. I think our job with the Gallup Investment District Plan is to focus on the specific elements of that, what fits, how to make it happen, how that interfaces with the state. So we've been working quite closely with NMDOT. As you can tell on the webinar today, they're on it and they're excited and they're very anxious for Gallup to get up and running. So we're focusing on the individual elements of the project in Gallup and the interaction with lots of industry players about how they might strategically utilize Gallup.
Thank you, Adam. And Charles, what would you see as a critical next step?
Well, I have to echo what what Jerry had mentioned. I think public education awareness to first of all try to mitigate, the sky is falling. But specific to Gallup, I think there's opportunities where the DOT and Gallup can work together when we start looking at the potential for, are there opportunities for corridor designation? Maybe doing an inventory on this segment of roadway in between Albuquerque and Gallup, evaluating it from the autonomous vehicles needs viewpoint, and trying to see if there's ways in which we can enhance those needs to consider, and not just this segment of roadway, but just a lot of the infrastructure throughout the state as well. So.
Thank you, Charles. So as we can see, this mobility sector encompasses multiple dimensions, multiple things we need to think about and plan for. And there's lots of moving parts, even if they're autonomous. So we have a lot of planning to do. And I wanted to see if Mayor Bonaguidi is still on the call here, if he wants to say a few words. Mayor, are you here? We've been involved in this for a year, and we've all learned a lot, and we keep on learning, and we're trying to apply this to what's on the ground in Gallup and things that GGDC has been working on for a number of years, such as Energy Logistics Park and Carbon Core Road, connecting the Energy Logistics Park to Highway 491, to the transition of the Escalante generation station that they closed a year ago, and developing a industrial park there that's also rail served. All of this has tie-ins to mobility industry, and we're going to continue work on that. For people who want to find out more about what we've done, as far as the roundtable, we had a white paper on mobility. There's a state mobility strategy, and those resources are available on the GGEDC website. So I'll have a slide up in the end here with resources, how to get in touch with the panelists and us. And now I'd just like to open up the floor to questions for the panelists. And you can either put them in the chat box or just speak up.
Senator Gonzalez, go ahead, Bobby.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Lundstrom. I really don't have a question. I just have a few comments. And first, I'd like to start off by congratulating Gallup, because I do feel you're ahead of the game, just by being at this meeting. And so it's going that too. But Lois, just want to mention that, yes, both Senator Padilla and myself, we're the ones that started by doing some funding for the study. But actually the credit goes to my son, Marcos Gonzalez, him and his friend Randy, and he works with Bernalillo County Economic Development, sat in my office for about an hour and say, you must do this because, this is coming. And it is, I actually have quite a bit to say, but I'll just keep my remarks real short. Is one of the things is that I just want to instill on everyone. And it was mentioned about education, and with that goes also awareness. But, what I call it is we have to work on a paradigm shift, to where we see that it is here and it's going to happen. And we can have the attitude that it's not going to happen overnight. We can be in the back seat. We have to be in the front seat. And, we can't lose our momentum, with this. And, we have been talking about this autonomous, with Western States Transportation Alliance for already a few years. So there's a lot going on. But I guess the part that I just want to really emphasize is that, especially from the Department of Transportation, or, as we're working with this, also seeing, from the Gallup group, is we can be behind on policy. So, I think it's going to be up to you to let us know if policies need to be in place. And by that, bringing into legislation, or if we're okay, that is fine too. But we can't get behind because, anytime that we get behind on policy, that puts us out another year, if we don't act on it during the year of the legislation. So that's one part. The other one that, was mentioned, as you mentioned, time and affordability, and then the safety of the 94% is, I think this is a perfect time that we really have to have something in place if those federal dollars come in for infrastructure. And, how can we be, as the old saying that we have had in the DOT for quite a few years, shovel ready. We have to be ready, with the infrastructure that we're looking at, so, that's very, very important because I feel that what goes into time is infrastructure. If you have the high level of infrastructure, of course, it improves time. And then the affordability, well, the affordability comes within, the commitment that we invest into it. And then the safety part, at a conference that I attended in Denver, and they showed us that, you're saying 94% of accidents are caused by human. If you improve on 94, you right away already have, a safety net because you're doing better than 94. So, that is going to happen with the accuracy of technology. But the part that also that you mentioned was on the airport. I think that with the airport and with what's happening nationwide, that is a perfect opportunity to incorporate this part with medical assistance, because if you can get someone from and that can also be a part of infrastructure. And I'll just give you a very small example is with Taos Regional Airport here in Taos, part of it is also the attractiveness of recreation, bringing people into the area. But instead of the aircrafts going back empty, they had created a system to where individuals that need medical attention to a higher level of medical hospital, and in one day making that trip and one day coming back, so just being creative again, but the most important part is that vision, and you're ahead of the game, as I mentioned, because, just being here. And I just want to mention that this goes hand in hand. About a week ago, we had a town hall meeting with direction of Luis Reyes, who is the CEO for Kit Carson Electric Co-op. And this is on electric vehicles. And it was amazing that we received like 75 individuals that signed in with basically very little information about the meeting. And the questions that came up are very parallel to, the discussion today. But it was very interesting to see because, we talk about that paradigm shift. I was saying is like, when you really think about it, say our salespeople that sell cars, they're not trained to sell electric vehicles. So that's a whole new area of, what's coming into. Then I was having a discussion with a top mechanic, and he tells me, well, when we move into electric vehicles, those are very, very dangerous. The skill set that's going to be needed by mechanics is going to be very individualized, plus the same, very specialized, because, you just can't get into one of those vehicles and do the wrong thing because of the high voltage in it. So it's interesting. I'm excited. Anything that I can do to assist with this, I'd be more than glad to. And thank you again for the invitation. Thank you, Representative Lundstrom.
Thank you, Senator Bob Gonzalez.
Garcia, Representative Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative Lundstrom. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the people that are on this Zoom meeting. It's very important that we stay ahead of the game. I think Representative Armstrong said it at one time. If you're not leading, you're following the dog, and the scenery looks the same after when you're following it. All looks the same after a while. So we need to stay ahead of this game, because as we all know, this is going to happen. And if we're not ahead of the game, we're going to be behind this game, and we cannot afford that. And a lot of issues have come up. Safety is number one issue. Senator Gonzalez started this on that, and we do have to keep that into consideration on people's safety and so forth. Another thing that we need to make sure we do is to make sure that the highway department has funding enough to do what we're doing. It's going to take a lot of money and do striping roads and so forth. Because right now, I think it costs like $1. I mean, like, I don't know what it was, $1 something a foot to stripe, and it can go up to $16 a foot to do everything we need to do. So we need to address those issues as we go along, Madam Chair. And I'm all for it. That's why I helped sponsor this bill, because it is going to happen. And if it doesn't happen here, it's going to happen somewhere else. And we have the perfect opportunity in Gallup, especially because we're about 10 hours out of Los Angeles and 10 hours out of Dallas. So we're right in the middle of it. And that's very important, because we need a hub here to take care of all these issues, not only for autonomous vehicles, but for all vehicles that are involved on our highways. And, I think we have the perfect opportunity. And if we don't take advantage of it, it's going to bypass us. We're going to be saying, wow, we should have done this 2 years ago. And we all know that it's not going to happen overnight. But we all also know that it is going to happen. And with that, Madam Chair, thanks for the invitation, and thanks to everybody on this panel for being here today.
Thank you,
Terry.
Representative.
Thanks, Representative Garcia. The way this goes, and think about the Iditarod, if you're not the lead dog, the scenery never changes.
There you go. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Back to you, Bruce.
Yes, and I also recalled something that the Representative Garcia mentioned, which is just that we lead the country in negative indicators in so many areas, especially here in McKinley County. And as Representative Garcia pointed out, that this gives us an opportunity to be a leader in something good, something that we can be very proud of. So I appreciate getting that from you, Representative.
Bruce, and what Bobby said earlier, Senator Gonzalez, said earlier, this is followed in hand. This bill on autonomous vehicles, the bill on our airport infrastructure, these are all going to fall into place at the same time. Because if we have both of them in place, we'll be in good shape. As people say, hey, these people have their stuff together. We really need to look at this. Because we do have rail. We have the biggest interstate in the country. And, I think probably about 35,000 trucks passed, or 3,500 trucks passed per day, if not more than that. So we really need to take advantage of these projects. Thank you. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Representative Garcia. And I'd just like to recognize we have the County Manager, Anthony Demas Jr. on the call, and I just wanted to call on him if he would like to comment to this effort.
Hey, thanks, Bruce. No, we really appreciate being part of this. I think it's a big project that Patty's leading, and it's something I think we can lead in, especially in our rural area. I think it's really something that the county and the state can take a lead in this project. So I'm really looking forward to the next meeting and how everything comes together once we do the different studies and we start planning. So I think it's going to be very big for the city and the county and the state. And we really appreciate you and Patty inviting us to this meeting.
Okay, Bruce, you have Mark Flesher. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Do we have one person that's going to coordinate trying to put this effort together and kind of be the liaison for the university and for the city and for the providers and the vendors of the vehicles and those type of thing? Is that going to be you, Bruce? Is it going to be somebody else going to be picked? What's the?
Let me just explain a little bit about the structure. Currently, EDC is working with the city of Gallup, and currently funding is coming through the Economic Development Administration. And I noticed that Trish Corbus, the Economic Development Administration rep, has been on this call, on this Zoom meeting. So we have a parallel track of planning documents that are occurring right now. And one of our consultants is GLD, which is Lois and Adam here participating. There'll be other consultants hired through the city process regarding airport master plan and then a transportation master plan. That will all be done in sync the next year. And we have a piece of that responsibility, but much of it is being led by the city now through the EDA process.
Two things that kind of stood out to me is we should get with UNM Gallup about doing a mobility technician program, which was talked about today. That takes forever to get them to move, as you know. And second, when you were talking about the accidents that are inevitable that Charles was talking about, in people's mind, if you have 100 accidents and one was an autonomous vehicle, they're going to go to that one and say that could have been avoided if there was a driver. So I don't know if the Department of Transportation could do this, but it'd be nice to have some sort of analysis done on a weekly basis. They put out that there were 141 car accidents in New Mexico and 68 of them were driver error and something were something else. And it's anticipated that 28 of those accidents could have been avoided with autonomous driving. And if people start seeing that week in and week out, either on social media or other places, they're going to start realizing that accidents are inevitable, but there could be a lot less with autonomous vehicles rather than worrying about the one accident. They say, gee, there'd been a driver there that wouldn't have happened.
And Mark, this is Jerry Valdez with NMDOT. Every Friday, I get a crash report from our Traffic Safety Bureau that actually gives us the crash data from a week-to-week perspective, and it gives us the trends from prior years as well. So we would absolutely incorporate that kind of analytic analysis into our crash reports to make sure that we have the analytics necessary to make informed decisions. But on top of that, when I'm talking about education of the public, we have a very robust communications group, and we've talked to Lois and Adam about the necessity to really partner to control the message about changing the paradigm shift, right? Like Senator Gonzalez talked about. So we are all in to make sure that we're a partner with Gallup, with everything that they're doing to make sure that we're contributing to a positive narrative around the truth and not misinformation, because one crash for every 100 crashes definitely is going to be much higher on the 10 o'clock news as anything as we're moving towards autonomous vehicles.
That's why I think if you could do that and you get that a lot of that information already, give some sort of subjective analysis as to how many could have been avoided with autonomous vehicles, so people start realizing that they're not going to avoid 100% of the accidents, but they may avoid 50% or 35%. And they start
94% is a big number to bite off of, and so
even
if you reduce it by 50%, that is a huge number, and that's a huge amount of our neighbors, family, and friends that will still be with us because of these types of initiatives.
And savings in personal injury, savings in repair of cars, insurance, it goes on and on. It'd be nice to start getting that information out so people realize that there's not going to be 100% reduction, but 50 to 94% is a huge difference. Thank you.
And to follow on that, Mark, there's also, I read about a study in Sweden where they're saying that through mass use of autonomous vehicles will reduce climate change by 90%, the part that's generated by vehicles. So that's something that also weighs in on the health side and safety, I think, and another plus that this is potentially very green technology, and we're going to be looking in and working on all of those pieces as well. So I see we're at time now. If you guys can hold on just a second, I'm going to put up a slide with everybody's contact information. This is a rich project and rich subject, and we've got a lot of work to do, and we very much look forward to doing all of it. And thank you for all of your support and everything that everybody's contributed. And a special thanks to the panelists today. If you were in person, we'd give you a huge round of applause, but let's go ahead and do that. Thank you. So let me share my screen, and we've got the contact information. Are you seeing my screen there?
Yes.
Okay. And if I don't have that information right for anybody, now's the time to fix it. But do want to draw your attention to the Greater Gallup website there. We've got all kinds of resources, both on mobility and the roundtables that we put on, but also just a wealth of information about Gallup and the kinds of economic development work that's being done here. So thank you, everybody. We appreciate you.
511 number.
What was that?
What's the 511 number?
Which 519?
Oh, 511, that is the traveler information number. So it's basically tied in with our traveler information dissemination. You dial 511 just like you would dial 911 for police or 811 for a one call ticket before you dig. 511 will get you road conditions.
Got it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Charles. I adapted a slide you had given in your previous PowerPoint. So that's where that logo.
Would you send this slide out, Bruce, so we all get it in our email?
Yes. Yeah, sure, I will.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.